Coming up in this week's episode, we've got cutting, welding, no drilling, but a heck of a lot of pounding. We use the hammer, the power hammer, the English wheel, the TIG welder, and guess what? More lead work. Please like, subscribe, and hit that bell. I hate to sound like a YouTuber, but believe it or not, it does make a difference. And the reason why is the more people do that, they promote those videos a little bit more, and more people get to watch and laugh at me trying to restore an old car. Well, to refresh, this was the body when it came in, and last episode we tackled all the metal work in the back tub section. And this week, we've got to do this panel above the door. I think it can be saved. The other thing that we have to tackle is both doors. The driver's door is rough, and I'll show you all what's going on with that. On the passenger side, quite a bit better. Well, the first thing I had to do is put some marks on this. I put some longitudinal marks with my Sharpie, and that way I could locate it right back in place again. And then I just took my pneumatic cutter, cut it off of there. And then I had to get somewhere in the ballpark, so it was just use the hammer and the bench here and just get the thing kind of in shape so that I could at least move to the power hammer with it. And as the thing kind of comes into sort of being in shape, now I can fire up the power hammer and go ahead and somewhat planish it out. And since there's such a big area, I didn't use a planishing hammer. I kind of used the power hammer as a planishing hammer. Then finally onto something quiet. I had to English wheel roll this thing to just kind of roll all those little hammer marks out, kind of get the hump in it just right. Remember, all these tools do is they stretch. Unless we put a shrinking die in a power hammer, what I'm doing here is I'm stretching it. And in this case, it's okay. I'm trying to get the shape in it from side to side and front to back. So when we talk about shape and form, I'm not so sure which is which, but shape I think is if you take a piece of flat paper and roll it up into a roll, that's shape. Form is something that's compound. Well, when you roll stuff out, you change the shape to change the form. So I've got to put it back into shape again, and so I use the table and the hammer here, and I just kind of do it the old-fashioned way, bend it back and forth to the car a bunch of times to get that roll exactly right to what the body is. And also it's got to be welded so that the thing goes straight down the car. You can't weld it so it's going up or down. It'd be pretty stupid of me if I did that. So this is the tub when it came in, and yes, aren't I quite the amateur editor, I figured out how to put an arrow in there. We got to tackle the bottom lip of this tub, and when they tore the thing off the frame, and I suppose they ripped the wood out of it too, they tore this lip off. Just to show you guys it wasn't an accident. I know how to do arrows. But you can see this lip is all torn off and gone. And before we marry this thing onto the wood framework, we're going to have to fix it. So every tool in the toolbox is what this is all about, and I got out the Miller-Matic 200, and since I needed my hand to pull the existing lip in, because a little bit of it was left, I'll just sort of tack it here with the MIG welder, and then I'll come back and I'll actually use the Heliarc, and then I can fix it. We never like welding on an edge. In this case, I had no choice. So I just kind of tack it here and there, use the hammer and dolly, make sure I'm mating that metal up, because once I weld this on a corner like this, there's nothing I can do with it. Patch panel on this thing was super easy. Just bend a piece 90 degrees in the brake, fit it in there, and I just tack it again with the MIG welder, and then I'll go back and I'll heliarc it. And you got to keep the things straight at every phase. That's why you see me out here with a hammer and dolly, just keeping those things lined up just right on each other. You can't have the metal not lined up. And again, this is 19 gauge so that I can get a nice lineup, perfect thickness, both the new and the old. And there we got it kind of tacked into place. Now I can come back with my TIG. I could have used the TIG all the way along. I just didn't have enough hands, and when I'm in a hurry I get out the MIG. Really, this is the way to do it, that or hammer weld it. But if you use the TIG welder, you can hammer weld it really pretty good, and I can control the heat so much more precisely with the TIG than I can the torch. I haven't torch welded and hammer welded in 30 years since I came out with TIG machines. Bang, 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 keep it straight, keep it straight. Weld about 3/4 of an inch, bang, 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 keep it straight, keep it straight. So there we have it. We have the bottom side of the tub in real good shape. Where I had the trouble in this thing is that the wood kit that I bought, believe it or not, the two wood sills were slightly different in shape from side to side. So I had to go along and, well, pick what I thought was right. I had one rust spot in the entire car. See it right there on the lip? That was it. Other than that, everything in this car was damaged due to people. Now remember, this is what we started with, and it was kind of a mess, all torn apart, and this is what we ended up with. Now this tub is ready to marry onto the wood sub rails. Well, look at me, I found another graphic that I could put on here, and this is the left door, and this thing is a huge mess. And see, I drew a line up here. That hinge is bent in so far that I'm gonna have to remove that hinge and work the door around it, because it's all puckered up there, you can see. And then I'll have to put that hinge back on again. Another problem with this door is that it looks like they went right in there with a forklift or something and raised that thing up. I also drilled a hole in it. So I had no choice. Sometimes we just have to come along and cut the inner structure of a door out or a body or whatever, and then we can work it. I had to do that in this case because it was so bent up. I needed to get the hammer in there and the dolly in there, and then also when we start welding on it, we're going to have to planish it back out again. So out comes the inner skin, and then we'll fix it, and then we'll have to weld that back in. Now the copper is just a backer so that I can weld this hole up, and this is just about the size where I'd say make a plug, heliarc it in there, or just fill it in with a MIG, and I'm in a big hurry, so the fastest way to do this is just come in here with a MIG, fill the hole up, and then grind it all back off smooth, then planish it out. Just a little 36 grit disc. I love these things. Clean it up. We'll do that on both sides. Then we'll finish planishing it out. And once we get that all done, then guess what? We'll get out the lead. Well, since I couldn't get all the way down in the corner of this thing, I've got to let it. So that's what I use these Scotch-Brite wheels for. I got to clean it all up nice and clean. No dark spots from the oxidation of the welding. Everything's got to be super clean. So it seems like from your comments that you guys are a little bit interested in lead, so I showed you a little bit more of the process in here. So what's critically important about this phase, which is the tinning phase, is we've got to get all of the acid back off there. If we don't do that, guess what? Later it's going to come through, it's going to bubble your paint. And how do I know this? I screwed up one time and I didn't get all the tinning compound off there. And a year later, sure enough, bubbling paint. So I had to go back and repaint all those sections of a car, and it was rather costly. So now what I'm doing here is I'm getting rid of that brown stuff, which is the acid. And all that tinning process is doing is making a thin layer of lead adhered to the metal. So that's what's left there, is a nice thin layer of lead, and all we're doing is coming along and making that thin layer thicker. I like the half-pound sticks of lead. That's what this is. It's 70/30 standard body solder. It works really well. The 1-pound sticks, you can't get the lead hot enough, and the panel gets too hot, and so you can't keep the panel and the lead about the same temperature. So I like the half-pound bars. These work really well. On a horizontal surface, you can just kind of melt the lead, keep the surface hot. You got to keep that lead so that when the lead drops off your stick, it's going to go and stick onto the panel. But horizontal surfaces are a cakewalk to lead on. It's when we're trying to lead upside down. And then you can complicate it one more way. Lead upside down on the back side of a panel that you just leaded. That's quite a trick to do that. So I'm just going to add in about as much lead as I think I'm going to need in here. And what's really difficult about leading something like this is that as you heat that panel, guess what it does? It expands and comes up at you. Well, as you're paddling that stuff out, you kind of think that, okay, I'm about right, I've got enough filler in here. Well, guess what? No, you don't. Because when you get done with this whole thing, you're going to have to shrink that back down. So whenever you're doing something out here like in a large flat area, you're going to have to add more lead to it than what you think. We put tallow on our wooden paddle, and then we just keep everything kind of at that nice, soft, buttery temperature, and then there we go. See, if I see a little spot of tinning compound on there, I'm not afraid to go in there and get rid of it. I guess if you were good at icing cakes, you'd be a good leader. Because if you can paddle the stuff out nice, and here I got a different lead paddle in my hand because I want to go down, I want to make a nice straight line where that molding is. But if you could ice a cake rather beautifully, you'd probably be a damn good leader. Is that what they call them? Would it be a letter? Sounds like something you put in the mail. So then I come along and I like to get that tallow off of there while it's still warm, so you can just wipe it off. And then hit it with the cold air so that you kind of shrink that panel back down again and you're not dealing with a bunch of warpage. And then chase the damn thing around the shop as you file away. And this actually, it takes a lot of time, even if you do really good paddle work. Oh man, look at all these strokes. See, I had to add some more in those low spots to make it right. But you just kind of keep going back and forth. Nice thing about lead is you can just push it around, be heated up, do it again. And after about, I don't know, 2 hours of work, then you get a nice repair. It's solid, it's good, it's not going to shrink on you. It's really the way to do it. Encourage you to try it. It's not that hard. Next week I'm going to tackle this firewall where they ripped a radius rod off, cut in 2 big heater holes here, ripped the thing off the frame without bothering to take the bolts out, and yes, they broke the thing and racked it 1.25 inches to the passenger side. Should be interesting.